Welcome to another episode of Mysteries Unknown. I was supposed to have Chester back on the show this week, but Chester had a couple things come up and he was not able to come back on. But I've got Rusty with me. Don't worry, Chester will be back, but I have Rusty with me tonight. And Rusty had a really scary encounter with Bigfoot in the mountains of North Carolina a couple years ago. And then he also had an encounter in a church with what he believes was a demon. You guys don't want to miss it. Really scary. I personally have an encounter with an angel myself. We talk about all that in this episode. Really good podcast. You don't want to miss it. But I just want to say thank you so much for being here. I appreciate every one of you guys. Let's jump right into it. Rusty, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man, I'm really glad you're here. I'm excited to share this with our audience. So take us back to this encounter in 2022 in the mountains of North Carolina.
I live in Middle Georgia. I drove up to North Carolina, Georgia line, and I was going to spend the weekend on a mountain on Betty's Creek. And when I got into town, I noticed a big, maybe an 8 or 10 foot Bigfoot made out of a tree trunk. And so I pulled in. This guy does artwork with a chainsaw. And so I took my picture next to it, and he told me that the day before, which would have been like Thursday, the sheriff's department got a bunch of calls for people saying they had a Bigfoot looking in their window. So I didn't put much stock in it. I went on up to the mountain, and the next morning, it was about 4 in the morning, I was sitting right on the creek next to a big fire, and I heard something to the left of me, and I knew it was an animal. I knew it was something big, either a big deer or a bear. And I figured it was probably 30 feet away. And then all of a sudden I smelled something really horrible. And I could tell it was animal, it wasn't chemical. It was a stinky, like pigs and goats, but it was so strong it burnt my sinuses a little bit. It was nasty. And then all of a sudden I heard something hit a tree about 40 feet to my right. Sounded like somebody picked up a good sized log and smashed it against the tree. And I have since then read that people that have Bigfoot encounters hear that. So I think they were just messing with me, trying to scare me off or whatever. So I went to bed, and then just a little while after that, I was in the cabin, and I was about 5 feet from the window. And the window, the cabin's on an incline because it's going down to the creek. So that window's at least 7 feet off the ground. All of a sudden I heard this god-awful, I don't even know what to call it. It was like a panther scream and a bear growl and a human all kind of combined. And it lasted for like maybe 5 to 7 seconds, which is kind of a long time for an animal noise in my experience. And it was, every hair on my body stood up. So the next morning, 8 or 9, I went outside, and I was going to go up to the top of the mountain because there's an old 1950s Cadillac at the very top of the mountain. Somebody got it up there, I don't know how, and couldn't get it down, but I was going to go up there and see what it looked like because it had been a few years since I'd seen it. And just before I'd come up there, like a week before, there'd been a bad storm, and a telephone pole had fallen down across the trail. And I knew the wires weren't hot because we had electricity back at the cabin, but I didn't want to take a chance, so I didn't want to step over it. So I went off to my left, and there's a little muddy spot next to a tree, and there was a footprint, and it was shaped pretty much like a human footprint, but fatter. And I wear a size 12 boot. I stuck my boot in there, and it was about probably 3 inches longer and about maybe 1.5 inches wider on each side. So pretty good size. And I took pictures, but they didn't turn out. It was just dark mud. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I didn't see a Bigfoot. I'm not going to tell you I did, but I know it was. It wasn't a bear. Bears aren't intelligent enough. They don't do things like that, and they don't smell like that either. I was the only person up there. And that wasn't a human footprint. And it was in the 40s. Nobody's going to be walking barefoot anyway.
How long did that go on at the campfire when you were sitting there? How long did that go on for?
Maybe a minute. Because I heard it and I smelt it. And just about the time I was really kind of looking, try to see it, is when the other one hit the tree with a log or a big branch. And that's when I said, man, there's two of them and they're messing with me or trying to scare me off.
I don't know that I could have slept very well in the cabin. I'd have been looking out that window all night.
Yeah, well, that was 4:30 in the morning. I got up about 8. I don't know if I slept or not, but every hair stood up on my body. I had hair standing up I didn't even know I had. It was intimidating, and I don't get scared too easily.
No, these things, I think they're very territorial, and I'm no expert, and nobody is, but I think if you're in their territory and they don't want you around, they definitely will pace you out. That's one of the things that I have, come to discover through doing this is they're really good about pacing people out of their territories. I think they just don't like you in there where they're at. With that being said, I would honestly love to know your opinion on what do you think Bigfoot is? Like, where do you think it come from? What do you think it is?
I have no idea. I mean, it's just a big animal, huge animal, really bigger than a bear, not as thick, I don't think, but because I've seen bear tracks that were deep, they weigh a lot. If he's 8 foot tall, he probably weighs 350. I would think, but other than that, I don't know. We were talking earlier about, people say, why haven't we ever seen a body, or why don't we get pictures? And I mentioned that some people think that there are other dimensions. And I mentioned, you can see some types of light and some you can't. I think it's possible that there's things right here, right now that we just don't see.
I don't think anybody knows. And, I can tell you that there's a lot of things in my law enforcement career that I saw that I just can't explain. And I've shared this story once on the podcast, and I'll share it because it kind of relates to things like that. And, you're talking about people and things disappearing and not knowing why or where they went. But, man, I went to this little church one time in a small town, and I knew everybody in this church. So after service, this gentleman came up to me, and I'm pretty sure that I saw an angel, to be honest with you. And I don't know what you believe, but I know I did. And so this guy walks up to me, and he looks at me, and he says, "Hey, you'll never see me again, but you just need to keep doing what you're doing." It's pretty personal. I don't share it that often. But the gentleman turned around and walked off, and he looked at me and said, "You'll never see me again." And I went around, back to what I was doing, and, after church, I went to the back of the church, and I never saw him leave. I never saw him again. And sure enough, I went to church there 2 or 3 years after that, and I never saw that guy again. And so, I look at these things through a spiritual lens, and I'm no expert, but the Bible does say that we'll entertain angels unaware, and we'll see things that, we don't know and can't explain. And I think they could be fallen angels or Nephilim, and there's a lot of things. But, there's just a lot to that story, and who knows, right? But it's a mystery, and I think I know the answer to this question, but if you had the opportunity to see one up close, would you want to?
Yeah, I would love to. And when you told that story, I got chill bumps because I had kind of the flip side of that. I was at church one day, and our priest was out of town, and we had a visiting priest from Miami. And when he was up there, he said some things that were absolutely the opposite of what we believe. And I can't remember what it was, but it was absolutely wrong. Enough that I approached him after church and told him, I said, you were telling people wrong up there, and he looked at me. I saw the devil. He just stared at me, and I could see in his eyes were this really light green, like almost had light behind it. It was scary. I don't even like thinking about it. But he was a demon or something, trying to lead people the wrong direction. And I know it for a fact. People say, "Oh, I believe in angels." Well, if you believe in angels, you got to believe in demons. There's no darkness without light, So,
I think people get a misconception like, "Oh, there's no way that, a demon wouldn't come to a church or whatever." But I think they're not afraid of a building. They're not afraid of a church. They are afraid in the name of Jesus.
I think their job is to destroy the church.
Absolutely, man. That's what they're here for. That's what they do. And
yeah, I mean, we're their enemy. They're trying to get us away from that. They want to lead us, away from it. So, just like an angel would want to lead you the right way.
I mean, it says he comes to kill, steal, and destroy, right? That's what he came for. And so I believe that, you know, some of these encounters people are seeing are evil, not all of them. But I do think that there could be something to that. They could be Nephilim. They could be all those things. But, man, I appreciate you sharing that with me. I know that's a really personal thing. And, man, that's really an honorable thing you did to go and approach that person. And that's really scary to be facing something like that because...
Well, I've never done that before, but I really felt... I can't remember what it was. I wish I could, but... It was flip side of what we believe, and I had to say something.
Well, man, I appreciate you being here and sharing that encounter with my audience. I'm really glad that you stood up and did the right thing in your church because that's not easy. That was a really scary encounter, and I'm glad you're all right. And let us know in the future if you see anything when you go back out there. I appreciate you being here, and hopefully we'll hear from you soon. Guys, thanks so much for being part of this podcast, being part of this community. Matter of fact, if you like this video, you'll like the next one. Make sure to click on it and watch it. It's a really good encounter. And I appreciate every one of you guys. And like I always say, stay prayed up. We'll talk soon.